Alrighty, I am back. I've been gone the last couple of days because I guess it's been 3 days now. Because frankly, I've just not had anything to say. I've been so, you know, laser focused on Israel since last October. Like that's been the only thing that's really been of interest. But wars tend to get my attention. As far as that's concerned, because war is literally the worst thing that ever happens. And so it's hard to care about other stuff. It's hard for me to, really take any interest in whatever the stupid trials they've got, that they're putting Trump through. So, like, certainly the day-to-day on those, I do not have the mental bandwidth to focus on that. Uh, you've only got so much, like, outrage RAM in your brain. And wars, the literal mass slaughter of human beings, those take up like all of my, whatever you want to call it, bandwidth, RAM, whatever the tech analogy is. I can't be bothered to get upset particularly about anything else when that sort of thing is going on. But nevertheless, the impact of these trials on America and thus on the world are very real. Because let's say, even if these trials do not lead to, let's say, Trump's imprisonment or him being stripped off the ballot in particular states, this trial, or these trials, plural, are having an effect on the minds of voters. Even if I don't care about them, there are a lot of people who do. So the question to me, the interesting thing here is, are these trials going to change anyone's mind one way or the other? Are they going to make certain groups of people more likely to get out and vote for their preferred candidate, or less likely? What effect, assuming that none of these trials actually lead to Trump going to prison, Eugene Debs style, let's just, try and war game it out. Is this stuff going to change anybody's minds? I don't think so, frankly. I certainly don't think that there is the voter out there who thought, that Trump guy, he's a stand-up guy. I really trust him and I like him. But now that I hear about this trial that, he's being turned into, oh, is this Trump? Is he a criminal? Oh, gee, I'm not going to vote for Trump now. I don't want to be tied to someone who's a criminal, because usually we know, even if people get acquitted, they're still probably guilty. They just got off on a technicality. After all, that's what Americans always say when someone is actually acquitted by our justice system. That like 5% of the time that it happens, or 1%, I forget, depending on which court you're actually dealing with. Certain courts have like a 99.9% conviction rate, and Americans just think that's totally normal. And they still, the few percentage of people, like, let's say, Kyle Rittenhouse, who beat the system, and they actually end up acquitted by a jury of their peers. A good chunk of Americans, depending on the case, but in a general case that's not politicized, the average American will just say, oh, yeah, that guy was probably guilty. He got off on a technicality. Ironically, it's the politicized cases like Rittenhouse and Trump that there probably are more people sympathetic to the defendant. People are less sympathetic to the defendant when it's not politicized. But if it is politicized, at least people are then trying to look for an excuse, for their guy to not be guilty. And so ordinarily, if this were anyone else other than Trump, I would say, for that reason alone, the fact that he is being put on trial is a net advantage for the Democrats. However, because Trump is already, one of the most well-known, probably the single most famous person in the world, because of this, that won't be the case. This is not just some guy who's been charged with a crime. Trump is someone who has cultivated an image, as an outsider, as someone who is, a renegade, taking on the system, trying to beat the odds. And in that sense, these trials play perfectly into, his own narrative, as I think muddled as it is these days. His whole persona is very much consistent with these trials. And so obviously, none of the core Trump base is going to be scared off by these trials. But what about, like the soft Trump voters? The people who, are not, don't really care one way or another about his personality, but are more, let's say, pragmatic, and they just think in terms of, well, gee, will I be doing better? Do I think that I'll have a better life when Trump is president or when Biden is president? How are those people going to be impacted by it? Do you think that they would be able to buy into this idea that, Trump is, they're just trying to take him down because he's so great and because they're so bad and because, he's trying to protect us. And so that's why they have to stop him. That boomer Facebook meme, where it has like Trump with a black background, sitting in a chair and like pointing at the screen, and it says, they don't hate me, they hate you, I'm just in the way. That's like, that meme's like 10 years old at this point. Would a, fence sitter, kitchen table voter, generally indifferent person, would they be able to buy into something like that? Honestly, I think there's a potential for that. I think that the martyrdom argument holds some weight for a lot of people, and I don't think you have to be one of these, like a Trump cultist or something. Especially because the way that they're doing this, there's multiple trials all going on at the same time, in the election year, all culminating, right before the election. It doesn't take, you don't have to make very many logical leaps to come to the conclusion that, like, oh, these prosecutors, who all happen to be Democrats, all suddenly discovered that, at various different points throughout Trump's life, because these charges and things date back, to different periods and, are all vastly different events and things. They all just happen to discover, throughout their investigations that Trump committed a crime, and they all happen to, file charges, and the court, and the courts happen to set trial dates and things that just happen to line up with the election year. It just all seems rather convenient. And considering that I think the average American considers prosecutors and the justice system, on the one hand, they do think that criminals are guilty. They're very cynical about that. They think if someone's charged with a crime, if they're charged with murder, they're probably a murderer, even if they are acquitted. The average American also has a very low opinion of all lawyers, whether they be prosecutors or defense attorneys. They have a general instinct that the system in America is rigged, that our government officials are corrupt. Americans outside of, like, let's say, the upper middle class, the professionals, the highly educated, those people have a lot of faith in the bureaucracy and in, corporate America, because that's them. They have faith in, in their own culture. But the vast bulk of the population, it's not, people don't. We don't have elections where your vote counts based on how influential you are in society and over, the levers of power. We do have, technically, now the extent to which it's enforced is very much up for debate, but we do technically have one man, one vote here in America. And so when I speak in these generalities about how Americans think, I'm talking about the biggest group of people, the working classes. And that's of all political backgrounds. And so that's all to say that I think on net, at best, what the Democrats could hope for in terms of a political outcome from all of these political prosecutions is zero net effect, I think that it's possible that this slightly advantages Trump. But I don't think, you take your average Democrat voter. See, I've been talking average voter, meaning across all America up until the point. Now, if you talk average Democrat voter, they already think Trump's a criminal. They already think Trump's a crook. They already think that Trump is a traitor to Russia. And they're already very much energized to vote against him because of that. They think that if Trump wins, America will literally be over. There was a guy I used to, in a, rapidly changing, but for the time being, rural area in Florida. I remember driving, it was on a major highway. He had a marquee in front of his house. And, over the years, as I drive through that part of the state, he would change the marquee and it would say different things. And after the 2020 election, the very much fortified election, then this is a funny anecdote. It doesn't really relate directly to what we're talking about, but it popped into my head. He changed the marquee to say, R.I.P. USA, 1776 to 2020, no God, no country, the end. And from that day forward, he never changed the marquee again. It said that the marquee had that. Had those, and he would change it all the time. He'd always write different phrases on there, because he had a little, he had a sign. He could write whatever he wanted on there. It was like something you'd have in front of your business, in the 80s or something. I'm sure he bought it surplus from something. But after that, after 2020, he left it on there for years until he sold his house. And then I assume the new owners, like either he took it with him or he got rid of it, or, the new owners got rid of it, something like that. But it was a funny sign. But anyway, that's how the average Democrat voter feels about Trump being elected. So, when things are already turned up to 11 for them, these trials are not making them, I don't think, any more intensely passionate about voting against Trump. That demographic is pretty much set. The people who probably are more on the fence are the folks who would be considered, or who I think would be convinced by a more, pragmatic approach. And you know what? Some of the, the pragmatic people, the people who consider themselves to be, I won't say in the middle, because no one is in the middle. There's nobody. You know what the middle looks like? The middle looks like Hillary Clinton and George W. Bush. That's the middle in America. That's when they agree on most things and they're wrong about everything that they agree on. But anyway, as far as voters who are up for grabs, I don't think it's that, you have all these people who are in a vacuum. They're going to vote no matter what, and it's a matter of who they're voting for. That's normally how people think about it. I tend to think that the way these things tend to work is you have people who are already leaning in one direction or another, and it's a matter of, these people who aren't that passionate about voting. Who is going to be the most energized, And so those are your soft voters. They're the marginal voters on each side. You have people who not really sure that they're going to vote, not really interested in taking the time out of their day to vote, but if they would end up voting Biden or vice versa. And so what you need at this time is something that would energize those people and make them passionate about getting out to vote. I don't think I don't think that there are very many voters in this country who are disinterested in the process generally. But if they did vote, would vote for Biden, who sees, hey, more stuff about Trump's going to go to prison this time. I don't think that gets them off the couch and say, you know what? I didn't really care about what was happening in the election, but now that I hear that Trump's going to prison, I want to make sure that I vote for Biden because I'm worried that Trump might be in prison. It doesn't connect. Like the average person, when they hear, oh, Trump's being prosecuted, he's going to go to prison, they would think, oh, well, then he won't even become president, even though technically he could. legally, that is what would happen. If Trump won the election and he was in prison, he would be the president from prison. I don't think most people are worried about that because they don't think that that's possible. Most people, when they hear, hey, Trump's going to go to prison, they think, well, Joe Biden's going to win no matter what. I would think that your marginal Democratic voters are going to be less interested in voting. And if anything, you would have, marginal Republican voters, perhaps encouraged by their friends and family, saying, you know what, we really need to go out and vote to make a statement, that we have a problem with this, with our candidate being persecuted this way. And even if you don't like Trump, they'll do it to the next guy, that kind of a thing. I think that's more likely to happen as a result of these trials than Democrat voters who, are not that interested in voting going, oh, well, now I'm definitely going to vote. No, I would think this would make you more complacent if you were a, somewhat politically disinterested Democrat voter. Someone who would vote Democrat, but just am not that interested in the process and, not that concerned. You're not going to be more concerned about the process if you hear, oh, yeah, the other guy, he won't even be able to stand for election because he's going to be in jail. But then again, if you think about it, you just got to fortify the election in a couple of different states. And, what happens in the other, 48 or 47 states doesn't really matter. As long as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin hold, all three of them, I don't think that Trump has a path. I think he needs to, even if he won, let's say, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, he's still got to pick up one of those three. And all three of them are still firmly, in Democrat control, and they were well fortified in the 2020 election. And so let's say, for example, that somehow, Trump is able to pull out a win in Arizona, even though Arizona is not Republican controlled now. Nevada, which now has a, Republican governor who, the only thing I knew him for before he was the governor was covering up the Vegas shooting. So not a great track record, but let's just say that he cleans up the voting system enough to where, Trump is able to get a fair win there. And Georgia, begrudgingly cleans up their electoral system, since nominally it is still a Republican-controlled state, and Trump ends up winning there. Even if all those things happen, and the stars aligned, you got to win one of those. It's going to come down to one of those three: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and I think they've got plenty of wiggle room there to make sure that the good guys win. And everything that I was talking about earlier about I don't think the average working class voter is going to be scared off by the idea that Trump has been indicted for crimes in an election year, and that they would scratch their head at that and think that, gee, that seems pretty screwy. That is all the more true in the Rust Belt states, because that is, I think that's very much the culture there. It's not going to, it would hurt Trump in a place like, I don't know, Connecticut maybe. I think it would hurt him in New Hampshire or Maine. Well, no, because, Trump, the only place where Trump does well in Maine is northern Maine anyway, and I think northern Maine is going to go Trump no matter what. Well, let's say somewhere like Omaha, Nebraska. That's somewhere that Trump, which is one electoral vote, so it's not nothing. Omaha, Nebraska is one electoral vote, and I can see that, let's say, being the difference in that sort of a place. And in a close election, one electoral vote here or there can make a big difference. So anyway, I have to dive a little bit deeper into this stuff and figure out exactly how I think it would all shake out. But that's sort of the foundation for my thoughts. I think I'll try and develop it from here, because we are getting into election season, so I do need to kind of start thinking about the election at least. So anyway, with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.